You know that moment when everything feels like it's finally falling into place? That's where I thought I was just a few weeks ago. My name's Aaron, and I'm 31. For 2 years, I'd been in what I believed was a perfect relationship with someone I genuinely thought I'd spend my life with. Her name was Melissa. We met at a mutual friend's holiday party, one of those nights where I almost didn't show up. It had been a long week, and I was tempted to stay in. But my best friend Mike wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept saying I needed to get out there and live a little. So reluctantly, I went. And there she was. Melissa stood out in a way that made it impossible not to notice her. She had this infectious laugh that drew people in, and when Mike introduced us, I felt like the luckiest guy in the room. We hit it off right away, talking about anything and everything. I remember leaving that party with her number and feeling more optimistic than I had in a long time. Our first date wasn't anything fancy, just burgers and a walk in the park, but it felt perfect. She was charming, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. I hadn't expected someone like her to be so easy to connect with. I knew pretty quickly that I wanted something serious, and over time, that's exactly what it became. Things weren't perfect, though. There was one glaring issue: her younger sister, Zoe. From the start, Zoe made it clear she didn't like me. I couldn't pinpoint why. She wasn't outright rude, but her comments always carried a sting. "Wow, Melissa, you're really going for the low-maintenance look these days, huh?" she'd said during one of the first family dinners I attended. Melissa brushed it off as Zoe being Zoe, saying she was like that with everyone, but it didn't feel that way to me. Zoe seemed perfectly pleasant with everyone else, just not me. I started dreading any gathering where she'd be present, but for Melissa's sake, I put up with it. Despite Zoe's digs, Melissa and I grew closer. We moved in together after about a year, sharing a cozy house just outside the city. Life felt stable, like we were building something real. I wasn't in any rush to get married, but I couldn't help imagining our future together. Little did I know, the cracks in our relationship were already forming. Looking back now, I guess there were signs, small things that didn't sit right, but I ignored them. You know how it is when you're in love. You convince yourself that you're just overthinking. Melissa was my person, and I wasn't going to let little doubts ruin what we had. But those cracks were there. It started with her becoming distant. Not in an obvious way, but enough that I noticed. She'd cancel plans last minute or say she was too tired to hang out. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. Her job as a marketing manager was demanding, and I figured she just needed some space. Then came the girls' nights. At first, it was once a month, then once a week. She'd head out with her sister Zoe, or a group of friends from work. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't the jealous type, and I trusted her. But there was something off about the way she'd brush me off when I asked about her plans. "It's just a girl's thing," she'd say with a shrug, grabbing her purse. "Nothing you'd be interested in." She wasn't wrong. I wasn't interested in spa nights or wine tastings, but it wasn't about that. It was the way she seemed more excited to be out without me, like I was background noise. The distance grew. Even at home, things felt different. Melissa used to ask about my day, laugh at my dumb jokes, and cuddle up next to me on the couch. Now, her phone had more of her attention than I did. She'd sit on the opposite end of the couch, scrolling through her phone, lost in whatever conversation she was having. "Work stuff?" I asked one night. She glanced up, barely meeting my eyes. "Yeah, just some campaign ideas." I let it go, again. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just a rough patch. Every couple goes through those, right? But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One night, she came home later than usual from a work dinner. Her lipstick was smudged, and she smelled like a mix of perfume and whiskey. I couldn't help but notice the faint mark on her neck. "Long night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She nodded, kicking off her heels. "Yeah, just drinks with the team after dinner. You know how it is?" I didn't press further. I told myself I was being paranoid, but that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. And then there was Zoe. Zoe had a way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough for Melissa. Every time I saw her, she found a new way to remind me of Melissa's past relationships. "Remember when you and Eric went skydiving?" She'd say with a grin. "God, those photos were insane." Or, "Mark always used to bring you flowers. So sweet." It wasn't subtle. Zoe wanted me to know that Melissa had been with guys who were more exciting, more adventurous, guys who, in her opinion, were better than me. One night, after another jab from Zoe, I finally brought it up to Melissa. "Does your sister hate me?" I asked as we were getting ready for bed. Melissa sighed, pulling her hair into a messy bun. "She's like that with everyone. Don't take it personally." "It doesn't feel like that," I muttered, climbing into bed. "She's nice to everyone else." Melissa shrugged. "She's just protective of me. She'll come around." Except she never did. Despite all this, I was still in love with Melissa. So much so that I started thinking about proposing. After 2 years together, it felt like the natural next step. We had built a life together, and I couldn't imagine my future without her. The perfect opportunity seemed to be right around the corner. Jason's annual Christmas party. It was poetic in a way. That's where we met, and it felt right to pop the question there, surrounded by friends who had been part of our journey. I spent weeks planning it. I picked out the ring, rehearsed what I'd say, and even got Jason in on the plan to make sure the moment was perfect. I talked to Melissa's parents about it too. Her mom, Carol, and her dad, Frank, were thrilled. They'd always treated me like family, and they gave me their full blessing. Everything was set. I imagined the look on Melissa's face when I got down on one knee. I pictured her tears of joy, the cheers from our friends, the laughter and love we'd share. It was going to be the happiest moment of my life. Or at least, that's what I thought. The weekend before the party, the guys and I planned a fishing trip. It was something we did every year. Just us, a cooler full of beer, and a weekend away from everything. It was exactly what I needed to unwind before the big proposal. Melissa wasn't thrilled about me being gone for the weekend, but she didn't make a big deal out of it. "Have fun," she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek as I loaded up my truck. "Just don't forget to come back in one piece." I laughed. "I'll be back before you know it." The trip started off great. We were about an hour out when I realized I'd forgotten my tackle box, the one Melissa had given me for my birthday. It was brand new, packed with everything I needed, and I couldn't fish without it. "Damn it," I muttered, pulling over on the side of the road. "What's up?" Mike asked from the passenger seat. "I forgot my tackle box." "Seriously?" He laughed. "How do you forget the one thing you actually need?" I sighed. "I've got to go back and grab it. You guys head to the lake. I'll catch up." Turning the truck around, I started the drive back home. I wasn't happy about losing time, but I figured it wouldn't take long. Grab the box, head back out, and enjoy the weekend. Easy. At least, that's what I thought. I wasn't expecting anyone to be home when I pulled into the driveway. Melissa had mentioned she'd be out shopping with Zoe, so I figured the house would be empty. Honestly, I was a little relieved. I wasn't in the mood for any "what are you doing back?" questions. I just wanted to grab my tackle box and hit the road. But when I saw her car parked outside, my stomach did this weird little flip. Maybe their shopping trip ended early, I thought. No big deal. Still, as I walked up to the front door, something felt off. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You ever walk into a room and just feel like something's wrong? Yeah, it was like that. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me as quietly as I could. The air felt heavy, thick, and that's when I heard it. Voices coming from the living room. At first I thought, oh, Melissa and Zoe must have come back early. But then I heard the laughter. Not the fun, lighthearted kind either. This was different. It was sharp, mean, like they were laughing at someone. I froze in place. "I still can't believe he hasn't noticed." Zoe's voice cut through the quiet. That sarcastic, mocking tone I'd come to dread. "Not even a little?" Melissa's laugh followed. Soft but full of amusement. "Of course not. Aaron doesn't notice anything unless it's right in front of his face. He's too busy with his little hobbies." My chest tightened. "What the hell?" Zoe laughed. "God, he's so boring. I don't get how you put up with him. Fishing, hiking, seriously." Melissa sighed. "I don't know. He's safe. Safe? I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Zoe kept going. You could do so much better. Scott is way more exciting. My blood ran cold. Who the hell is Scott? Melissa's voice lowered, but I could still hear her. I know. I didn't plan for it to happen, but Scott is just different. And in bed? She let out a breathy laugh. Oh my God, it's insane. Aaron doesn't even come close. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Then why are you still with him? Zoe asked. If Scott's so great, why not just end it? Melissa sighed again. I can't. Not yet. I think Aaron's planning something big for Christmas. I don't want to ruin it before then. There it was, the final nail in the coffin. They knew. They knew I was planning to propose, and they were laughing about it, laughing about me, about how clueless I was, about how I wasn't enough. I felt sick. I must have shifted my weight or made some noise because suddenly Melissa called out, Aaron? Is that you? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My feet were glued to the floor, my mind racing. Every laugh, every word echoed in my head. I turned around, walked out the door, and got in my truck. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't even know where I was driving. I just needed to get out of there. I ignored my phone the entire drive. Melissa called a few times, sent a bunch of messages. I didn't read them. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? By the time I stopped driving, I was in the parking lot of some random motel. I checked in, threw my stuff on the bed, and just sat there, staring at the ceiling. Everything I thought I knew about Melissa, about us, was shattered. The woman I loved, the one I'd been planning to spend my life with, had been cheating on me with some guy named Scott. And worse, she was planning to stick around long enough to milk whatever proposal she thought I was going to make. I turned my phone off and stared at the wall. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. Like my brain hadn't caught up with what my heart already knew. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, clearer somehow. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed to get Melissa out of my life. There was no way I was going to let her stay in the house. The lease was in my name, so legally I had the upper hand. When I got back home, her car was gone. Perfect. I grabbed some trash bags and started packing her stuff. Clothes, shoes, makeup, anything that was obviously hers went straight into the bags. I didn't care if it seemed harsh. She didn't deserve the courtesy of a polite conversation. Once everything was packed, I dragged the bags to the front porch. Then I called a locksmith to change the locks. I wasn't taking any chances. By the time the locksmith left, I felt a weird sense of relief, like I'd taken back control of my life, even if it was just a small step. Before I left the house again, I wrote a note and taped it to the door. Simple, to the point. You know what you did. Don't contact me. Melissa must have come home not long after I left because when I checked my phone later, there were more messages. Aaron, where are you? Did you come home? What's going on? And then, more frantic, why is all my stuff outside? Please talk to me. I'm so sorry. Whatever I did, we can fix this. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could talk her way out of this. That night, as I sat alone in my motel room, the anger finally hit. How dare she? How dare she sit in my living room, laughing about me with her sister? How dare she keep me around, knowing full well she was sneaking around with someone else? I thought about all the times I'd brushed off my gut instincts. All the moments I'd convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Turns out I wasn't paranoid. I was just too trusting, too safe. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up again. Melissa's messages had gone from worried to desperate. Aaron, please. I don't understand what's going on. Why is all my stuff outside? What did I do? And then finally, the inevitable shift to anger. This is childish. You're being an asshole. At least have the decency to talk to me. Decency. That word hit me harder than it should have. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted decency after everything I'd overheard. After everything she'd done. I just shook my head, blocked her number, and tossed my phone aside. Done. Simple as that. She didn't deserve my time or energy anymore. I was still running on adrenaline when my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Melissa. It was Jason, the friend who had introduced us at that Christmas party 2 years ago. "Yo, man," he said when I picked up. "Everything okay? Melissa's been blowing up my phone all morning. She's saying you threw her out?" I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. "Yeah, I did." There was a pause on his end. "What the hell happened?" For the first time, I told someone the whole story. From overhearing Melissa and Zoe's conversation, to packing her things and changing the locks. I left out no details, not even the part about Scott. Jason didn't interrupt. He just listened, which I appreciated. When I finally finished, he let out a long whistle. "Dude, that's messed up." "Yeah." There was another pause before he added, "Honestly, good for you. She didn't deserve you." Jason's support hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't one to blindly take sides, so hearing him say that made me feel like I wasn't completely crazy for how I'd handled things. The next few days were a blur. Melissa didn't stop trying to reach me. She called from different numbers, showed up at the house, and even left handwritten letters in my mailbox. I didn't read most of them, but the few I skimmed all followed the same tired script: apologies, excuses, and desperate pleas for another chance. I was stupid. It didn't mean anything. "I love you, Aaron. Please let me explain." Blah, blah, blah. It was all bullshit, and I wasn't buying it. Zoe tried to reach out too, which honestly made me laugh. Her messages were completely out of touch. "Hey, I heard Melissa's upset. Maybe you guys should talk." Talk? Seriously? After everything I'd heard her say? I blocked her number without a second thought. At some point, I realized I needed to call Melissa's parents. Carol and Frank had always been kind to me, treating me like part of the family from the moment Melissa and I got serious. Her mom would pack me leftovers after family dinners, and her dad loved chatting about sports and grilling tips. They deserved to know the truth. When I called, Carol picked up right away. "Aaron, it's been a while. How are you, sweetheart?" Her warm tone hit me with a wave of guilt. I hated that I had to be the one to drop this bombshell on them. "Hi, Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have a few minutes to talk? It's important." "Of course," she said, sounding concerned. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, not really." I told her everything. How I'd come home early, overheard Melissa and Zoe talking, and found out about the cheating. I didn't sugarcoat it. I repeated their words verbatim, so she could understand just how low both of her daughters had stooped. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might have hung up. Then I heard a shaky breath. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. I can't believe this. Are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand," I cut in gently but firmly. I heard her start to cry, and a moment later, Frank's voice came through in the background. "What's wrong?" Carol must have handed him the phone because the next thing I heard was Frank's deep, steady voice. "Aaron, what's going on? Carol's in tears over here." So I told him everything again. By the time I finished, there was another long silence. Then Frank let out a heavy sigh. "I'm so sorry, son," he said, his voice low and serious. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." "It's not your fault," I replied. "But I thought you should know." Frank was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "You're absolutely right. They crossed a line, and they need to face the consequences. I don't care if they're my daughters. What they did is disgusting." Carol, still crying, chimed in. "Aaron, you've always been so good to Melissa, to our whole family. I can't believe she would throw that away. And Zoe, how could she encourage something like this?" I felt a pang of sympathy for them. They didn't deserve this any more than I did. We talked for a while longer. They asked how I was holding up, and if there was anything they could do to help. I told them I was okay, better than they probably expected, and that I was moving on. Before we hung up, Frank said something that stuck with me. "You've always been like a son to us. What Melissa did doesn't change that. You're welcome in our lives anytime. But as far as I'm concerned, she's out. Both of them are. I can't have people like that in my life, even if they're family. I wasn't expecting that. I figured they'd be upset, sure, but I didn't think they'd go so far as to cut ties with both of their daughters. It was a bold move, but it made me respect them even more. They didn't try to justify Melissa's behavior or pull the blood is thicker than water card. They stood by their principles. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Knowing that Melissa and Zoe wouldn't have the support system they were probably counting on gave me a sense of relief. But at the same time, I felt sad. Not for them, but for Carol and Frank. They had to face the reality that their daughters weren't who they thought they were. I wouldn't wish that kind of disappointment on anyone. Over the next few days, the fallout spread. Jason called me again, sounding amused. Well, she's not my employee anymore. Wait, you fired her? Damn right I did, he said. It's bad for morale, and I'm not keeping someone around who thinks that kind of behavior is okay. I wasn't expecting that, but I couldn't say I was upset about it. Melissa had always bragged about how secure her position was, but clearly, she hadn't seen this coming. Thanks, I said. But you didn't have to do that. Jason scoffed. This isn't just about you, man. I don't tolerate that kind of crap, period. The hits kept coming from Melissa and Zoe. Their parents cut off all financial support. Their friends started ghosting them as word got around. Even their social media followers began to dwindle. It was like watching their lives fall apart, brick by brick. I didn't expect things to spiral for Melissa and Zoe as quickly as they did. Once the truth started spreading, it was like their entire world started crumbling. Jason firing Melissa was just the beginning. A few days after that, I heard through mutual friends that Melissa had tried to play the victim card. She was telling anyone who would listen that I had overreacted, that I'd kicked her out without giving her a chance to explain. But it didn't take long for the full story to come out. Jason didn't hold back when people asked why she'd been let go. He made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate someone who thought it was okay to laugh about cheating on their partner. And her parents. Carol and Frank weren't the kind of people to keep quiet. They were furious with both of their daughters, and they made it known that they didn't support Melissa or Zoe's behavior. We raised them better than this, Carol told one of her friends at church, according to Jason. If they're going to act like that, they can do it without our help. Word spread fast. People who once admired Melissa and Zoe started distancing themselves. Invitations to events dried up. Even their Instagram follower count took a hit, which I knew had to be killing Melissa inside. She was the type to obsess over appearances. If her social media wasn't thriving, her world was crumbling. Apparently, Zoe let Melissa crash at her place for a bit, but that didn't last long. One night, Jason called me, clearly trying not to laugh. Guess what? He said. Zoe kicked Melissa out. What? Yeah, he chuckled. She told her to figure her own crap out. I guess even sisters have their limits. Hearing that was satisfying. I know it sounds petty, but after everything they'd done, it felt like poetic justice. They had spent so much time tearing me down, acting like I was boring, like I wasn't good enough. And now, they were the ones left scrambling to pick up the pieces. A week or so later, I got a text from Jason. Hey, don't forget about the Christmas party. Hope you're still coming. Don't worry, Melissa's not invited. This year's all about good vibes. I stared at the message for a while, debating whether or not to go. Part of me wanted to skip it altogether. The party felt too tied to everything that had happened with Melissa. But then I thought about it. Why should I let her ruin it for me? It wasn't her party. She didn't own that memory. And I wasn't going to let her take more from me than she already had. So, I decided I was going. Not just to see friends or enjoy the holiday spirit, but to reclaim something. My story, my dignity, my life. The night of the party, I showed up at Jason's house feeling more like myself than I had in weeks. Jason's place was decked out in Christmas lights, with a giant tree in the corner and festive music playing. People were mingling, laughing, and sipping drinks. It felt good to be around friends, people who had my back and knew the real story. I caught up with old friends, shared a few laughs, and even met some new people. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Melissa or what she'd done. I was just me. But of course, peace never lasts for long. About halfway through the party, the front door swung open, and there she was, Melissa. She looked rough. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and she wasn't wearing anything remotely festive, just a plain black coat and jeans. She looked completely out of place among the cheerful partygoers. The room went dead silent. Everyone turned to look at her. You could feel the tension crackling in the air. Jason was the first to speak. "What the hell are you doing here?" Melissa's voice was shaky, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I need to talk to Aaron." Jason stepped forward, blocking her path. "You weren't invited. You need to leave." She ignored him, her eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. "Aaron," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, I just need to talk to you. Just for a minute." Now, the old me, the guy I was a few weeks ago, probably would have folded. I would have given her those 5 minutes because I wanted to believe the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. But the new me, the one standing there with a room full of supportive friends and zero patience for her nonsense, yeah, that guy wasn't about to play along. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Talk about what, Melissa? You've already said everything I needed to know. You just didn't think I was listening." Her face crumpled. For a second, I thought she might actually turn around and leave. But of course, she didn't. She took a shaky step forward, tears streaming down her face. "Aaron, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I was stupid, and I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. Please, just give me a chance to explain." Jason cut in again, his voice firm. "Melissa, I'm serious. You need to go. This isn't the place for this." She spun around to face him, desperation written all over her face. "Jason, please, just 5 minutes with him. That's all I'm asking." Jason looked like he was about to lose it, but I raised a hand to stop him. "It's fine," I said. "Let her say what she needs to say." The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Melissa wiped at her face, trying to compose herself. When I stopped a few feet away from her, I kept my voice steady. "Go ahead," I said. "Say whatever it is you think will fix this." She took a deep breath, her whole body shaking. "Aaron, I was an idiot. I let Zoe get in my head, and I made mistakes I can't take back. But I swear, it didn't mean anything. Scott didn't mean anything. None of it did. You're the one I love." I stared at her, unblinking. "You love me?" I asked, my voice calm but cutting. "Is that what you were thinking when you called me boring? When you laughed about how clueless I was? Or how about when you said Scott was insane in bed and I didn't even come close? Was that love, Melissa?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I didn't mean any of that," she whispered. "I was stupid. I was trying to impress Zoe and I—" "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Don't blame Zoe for your choices. She might have encouraged you, but you're the one who made those decisions. You're the one who lied, cheated, and then laughed about it." Her tears were falling freely now. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the music. "I'm begging you, Aaron. I don't have anyone else. Zoe kicked me out. My parents won't talk to me. You're all I have left." I took a step back, letting her words hang in the air. "And whose fault is that, Melissa? Because it sure as hell isn't mine." For a moment, Melissa just stood there, tears streaming down her face. The reality of her situation was sinking in. I wasn't the guy who was going to fall for her tears anymore. I wasn't going to give her the closure she was hoping for. At this point, Jason had had enough. He stepped forward, his expression hard. "Time to go." Melissa shook her head, desperation flashing across her face. "Please, just—" Jason raised a hand and gestured toward the door. "You're done here. We gave you your 5 minutes. You've said your piece. Now leave." 2 of Jason's friends stepped in to help, gently but firmly guiding Melissa out. She didn't put up much of a fight. She looked over her shoulder one last time. Her eyes locked on me. "Aaron." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. I just watched as the door closed behind her. And that was it. The room was quiet for a beat before the music kicked back in. Conversations slowly started to pick up again, and people began to move on like nothing had happened. But I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Jason walked up and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You good?" I nodded, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Yeah," I said, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "I'm good." And for the first time in weeks, I really was. The fallout from that night hit fast and hard for Melissa and Zoe. Jason told me later that Melissa tried to reach out to more mutual friends, spinning the story to make herself look like the victim, but it didn't work. People weren't buying it anymore. "She's desperate," Jason said, shaking his head, "trying to get sympathy from anyone who'll listen, but after what she pulled at the party, no one wants to hear it." Zoe didn't fare much better. Word got around that their parents had cut them off completely. No financial support, no family dinners, nothing. From what I heard, Frank was especially furious. "I won't tolerate that kind of behavior," he told a mutual friend. "I don't care if they're my daughters. Actions have consequences." Melissa ended up crashing with a coworker for a while, but that didn't last long. She burned through her relationships one by one, until there was no one left willing to help her. It was poetic, really. The woman who once thought she was untouchable, who laughed behind my back, calling me safe and boring, was now scrambling to rebuild her life from scratch. Meanwhile, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. I took a few weeks off from work to clear my head. I went on solo hikes, spent time at the lake, and even took a road trip to visit some old friends. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking at my phone every few minutes, waiting for a message or a call. I was living for me. One morning, I stopped at a coffee shop on my way home from a hike. As I waited for my order, a woman standing next to me glanced over and smiled. "Rough trail?" she asked, nodding at my mud-covered boots. I chuckled. "Yeah, didn't expect it to be that muddy." We chatted for a bit while we waited for our drinks. Her name was Emma, and she had this easy, genuine way about her that put me at ease. It wasn't forced or awkward, just natural conversation. When our drinks were ready, she smiled again. "Well, enjoy the rest of your day." "You too," I said, watching as she walked out the door. I wasn't in any rush to jump into something new, but that brief encounter reminded me that there were still good people out there. People who wouldn't make me feel like I wasn't enough. People who wouldn't laugh behind my back. A few weeks later, Jason called me with another update. "Guess who just got fired again?" I groaned. "Let me guess. Melissa?" "Bingo. Apparently she got hired at some marketing firm, but they let her go after a month. Poor performance." I couldn't help but laugh. "She's really having a rough time, huh?" Jason sighed. "Yeah, but honestly, she brought it on herself. She thought she was untouchable, but now she's learning the hard way that actions have consequences." I thought about that for a moment. About how Melissa and Zoe had spent years tearing me down, acting like I was just some boring, predictable guy. And now, they were the ones dealing with the fallout. Poetic justice. I never heard from Melissa again after that night at the Christmas party. No letters, no surprise visits, nothing, and I was fine with that. I did hear from her parents, though. Carol and Frank reached out a few months later, inviting me over for dinner. I wasn't sure if it would be weird, but they made it clear that they still saw me as part of their family. When I showed up, Carol hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for everything," she whispered. "It's okay," I told her, and for the first time, I meant it. We spent the evening catching up, talking about everything except Melissa and Zoe. It felt good, like I was closing a chapter and moving on with my life. As for me, I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm focusing on myself, my hobbies, my friends, and the things that make me happy. I'm not rushing into anything, but I'm not closed off to the idea of meeting someone new either. Life has a funny way of working itself out. Sometimes, the people you think you can't live without turn out to be the ones holding you back. And once you let go of them, you realize just how much better things can be. Melissa and Zoe thought I was safe. They thought I was boring. But you know what? I'll take safe and boring over toxic and dramatic any day. Because at the end of the day, I know who I am. and that's enough.